Hello everyone, I'm Alastair, Willis, Music Director of the South Bend Symphony Orchestra. Welcome to our digital pre-concert talk for our second Jack M. Champaigne Masterworks concert. In the links below, I'm going to share insights on Schumann's uplifting Symphony No. 2. It's a journey from darkness and despair into light and celebration. I'm going to chat with our soloist Dylana Jenson about Samuel Barber's beloved violin concerto, and we'll look at a magical piece by Anthony DiLorenzo that I was lucky enough to conduct the premiere of a few years ago. It's called Jabberwocky, and it describes Alice's journey through the looking glass back to Wonderland. Thanks for watching. We can't wait to perform them for you on November the 13th at the Morris Performing Arts Center. See you there. You may be familiar with the famous poem Jabberwocky. It's a nonsense poem, one that confuses Alice and still confuses us today. It begins like this. "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toads did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe." It's a poem that all English school children learn. Who doesn't like talking in nonsense? And it happens to be my favorite poem. So imagine my extra delight when, in 2013, I was invited by the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra in Houston to premiere a piece called Jabberwocky. I couldn't wait to get my hands on the score, and it turned out to be one of the best premieres I've ever conducted. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be introducing it to our audiences in South Bend this weekend. The music immediately plunges into the magical atmosphere of Wonderland, as if we're opening a book, knowing that adventure is ahead. I find DiLorenzo's score quite cinematic, and his ingenious characterizations of the nonsensical creatures jump out of the music at us. The mome raths, the bandersnatches, the borogoves. Here is the jub-jub bird, portrayed at first by the contrabassoon as it circles, paces, and prances around Alice in a clumsy gallop. Just as we think the adventure is complete, the piece ends with the recitation of the entire poem over a magical and soft string accompaniment. This is highly imaginative, descriptive, and original music. Our soloist, Dylana Jenson, has had a unique career that's taken her all over the world. She's captured the musical imagination of several generations since her landmark recording of the Sibelius Violin Concerto with Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra at the age of 19. She now brings her life experience to the fortunate students at the University of Notre Dame. Dylana is one of the few teachers in the world who is able to free violinists from pain caused by playing the violin, both online and in person. I managed to meet up with her in person. Dylana, we are so excited to have you playing the Barber Violin Concerto with us. Tell us about your experience with the piece.
I started learning the Barber when I was a teenager.
A couple of years ago.
Yes, absolutely,
Right.
a few years ago. And I loved the piece. My parents loved the piece. My father especially loved the second movement. And my mother really made it so colorful for me and described it as being very epic and looking backwards on life. Of course, when you're 15, it's hard to look backwards on life. But it's a beautiful concerto. The first movement is incredibly open-hearted. It starts right away with the violin, which is unusual in a violin concerto. And the first movement is kind of melodic and wandering. It's like looking at a beautiful prairie. The second movement is strong, very strong, has one incredible solo passage that is all on the G string for the violin, which is, I use the word strong because I think that it is a really high element in the piece. And the last movement is unplayable, as it's been called. The last movement starts with an explosion and just doesn't stop until the end. And many violinists said it was unplayable, but I'll give it the best shot I got.
I know you can play it because I've heard a recording of you playing it, which is fantastic. So it starts with the violin, as you say. Are the first two movements sort of slow and then the last one is fast?
Yes, I mean, the first movement has some moments in it that are sort of capricious and a little bit faster and more flowing. Second movement, slow movement, very slow and very, it's just, it is one of those moments as looking backwards. And it's great to be older and playing it now. I loved it when I was a young person, but now I do feel that life experience brings me a whole vision backwards that we get as we get older.
So you're saying there's a sense of nostalgia to the music?
Beautiful word, yes.
Yeah, I get that too. And you mentioned a comparison to the prairies, perhaps listening, and then you're experiencing a prairie, which is a perfect analogy to be here in Indiana, a perfect place in the world to experience this. Now, what about somebody who's never heard this before?
Oh, I think that not to be afraid. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about this concerto. It is very melodic. It is not a modern concerto that's hard to listen to. And I think that people who are not even sort of experienced with the language of classical music will be able to relate right away to the melodic form of the piece.
Now, this piece you've been playing for a couple of years, you said, and the piece hasn't changed. But have you changed in your approach to playing it?
Well, yes, I think that as artists, we bring who we are to our art. And so what I brought as a young person was valid, and it had force, and it had, sort of a way of seeing life and seeing humanity. And now it's different. So what I will bring to it will be different because it will be so much more life experience and different feelings about life. I mean, isn't that what art is that we are sharing how we see humanity, how we see ourselves in the world, and bring everybody with us on that journey.
That is so beautiful. Do you have a favorite moment in the concerto?
Wow, a favorite moment. You know, it has so many beautiful parts. First of all, the opening, as we said, starts right away with the violin. It's very melodic, it's very beautiful, so it's easy to listen to, but it takes you on a journey. It's almost like saying, I'm going to take you on a journey once upon a time. And that feels like the beginning of the Barber. And so the first movement has beautiful moments. The first movement also has a moment that's very high on the violin, it's sort of in the middle of the movement, if you follow along, and it's very searing. Second movement, as I mentioned, that one beautiful passage that is all on the G string, which is the lowest string on the violin, very rich sounding. And this, it is sort of the climax of the second movement. It takes you, it's funny, it's a low climax. It's very low on the violin, but it is the high emotional place that we come to.
Wow. And you've played this with several orchestras. You've performed with the Philadelphia Orchestra, with the London Symphony Orchestra. We are thrilled that you are making your debut with the South Bend Symphony Orchestra on November the 13th. We
couldn't be more excited to hear what you're going to do with the Barber Violin Concerto.
Well, this is my new hometown.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Schumann's symphonies fascinate me. When I was a student at Bristol University in England, I had to study, dissect, analyze all 4 of his symphonies. I discovered that the world's top scholars consider Schumann's symphonies inferior to Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven's, and this is sort of proved as they are performed less. Their main reason? Schumann's orchestration is too thick. So what does that mean? Well, at least 2 things. Where Mozart and Beethoven would alternate melodic material, say between the winds and the strings, Schumann, more often than not, has both the strings and the winds playing at the same time. So with many instruments playing the melody rather than 1 or 2, this can sound thick. Second, the accompaniment in Schumann's symphonies also involves many players, and this can also make it sound thick. When approaching his music for performance, at face value then, playing exactly what's written in the score, the accompaniment could easily, at times, overpower the melody, or vice versa. So what's the solution, I hear you ask? Well, in a recording it's easy. You can go back and rebalance anything you want. But for a live performance, the solution that I've found is to mark in advance each orchestral part with additional dynamic indications so that each player knows how thick or thin the textures need to be. I found it helps the musicians in their preparation, and it saves enormous time in rehearsal as well. Now, this is not my idea. I've stolen it from the world's top conductors and orchestras over the years, and it's what I've done for our performance on November the 13th. And I'm driven to do this because it's been life-changing for me to hear how these beloved symphonies can sound in careful hands. Thick performances of Schumann just don't do his art justice. Okay, to the music itself. This symphony can be seen as a triumph over fate. We know that Schumann's life was a dark struggle of mental and physical illness, yet in this symphony we sense light. And to me, the strings at the very beginning speak of doubt, wandering, struggle, yet above them playing we hear a simple, pure brass motif of hope. This piece was admired in the 19th century for its perceived metaphysical content, which I feel stems from the brass motive, the piece's shining, guiding light, which comes back as a reminder throughout the symphony. This motive has been connected with the music of Bach, who, as we know, never composed a note unless it was for the glory of God, and the motive is also reminiscent of the opening of Haydn's Symphony No. 104. The second movement is a virtuosic tour de force for the orchestra, especially the violins. It's so technically challenging that to this day orchestras everywhere require it as an audition excerpt. To me, this movement sounds like someone sneezing, which makes sense on one level knowing Schumann was ill, but nowhere can I find that Schumann intended that. After all this hyperactivity, we as listeners need some rest, and the third movement provides just that. It's one of the most beautiful, emotional, and heartbreakingly romantic slow movements ever composed. Schumann himself needed rest after composing this movement, and he put the symphony temporarily aside. His health had much improved by the time he returned to finish it. He wrote in a letter, "In the finale, I first began to feel like myself again." Just listen to the opening notes, which ascend, rise, uplift, and energize us. The brass motif returns at the end, triumphantly bookending the symphony. Schumann's Second Symphony has special meaning for me. In my first year as assistant conductor with the Seattle Symphony, Ulf Schirmer, a renowned German conductor, was coming to conduct it. Alas, visa issues prevented him from flying, and I was given 48 hours notice to step in. It was my first big program with a major orchestra, and a week I'll never forget. It's always inspiring, rejuvenating, and uplifting to experience this symphony live, and we can't wait to perform it for you on November the 13th at the Morris Performing Arts Center. Thanks for watching our digital pre-concert talk.